Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Convos. I'm your host, John, and I have today with me Assemblyman Ken Cooley. Give him a big round of applause. Hello, Mr. Cooley.
Hello, hello.
We're both sitting outside today. Are you on a golf course? Where are you?
No, I'm in Capitol Village Park, which 18 years ago, as a vice mayor of a new city, in my first year, I helped design in a planning charrette here in Rancho Cordova. This is a community, a park, a shopping center in the middle of 50,000 jobs. It was a rock pile in the city form. It's now become the center of community events.
I love it. I happen to be in a former state capitol. I am in Benicia today. I'm getting some work done down here on my Airstream. And so I'm sitting in a park in Benicia.
Very good.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us today. Coffee Convos, I don't know if you've seen any of the previous episodes, but it's not really a political program. We've talked to people in business and the arts and education, but something happened a couple of years ago when we interviewed potential city council members in our city, and it hit a nerve, and we had over 16,000 views. And so it seemed like high time to go ahead and do that again. So we're glad that you are here. While you're technically the incumbent in the assembly, you're running for office in a newly formed district, District 8. Is that correct?
District 7.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're in District 8 right now. You're running. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Correct. And so I'm running where I've represented for the last 10 years, although Fair Oaks, Orangevale, and Folsom have been added. So 70% of the district for me has not changed over the last 10 years of representation. And of course, I've lived in the area since 1977 with my wife, Sydney. I was actually, in my first 5 years as a city council member, I went through the League of Cities. I became the statewide number 2 officer, and that meant I was president of the Sacramento Valley Division, of which the city of Folsom was a very active member. So I've sort of been a colleague in the city government and state government and in the League of Cities with all the cities in the county.
So you've been in office in various capacities over the last 10 years, including mayor of Rancho at one point.
At 20 years, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you tell us some of your greatest accomplishments? Go ahead and brag on yourself for a little bit.
Well, I think, Rancho Cordova, after the base closure, had significant challenges. We were less than half of the city. Less than half was owner-occupied housing. Very substantial low and moderate income areas. Cityhood has been very good for it. Basically, 5 people focused on the future. As I say, I'm sitting in a park, in a neighborhood, in a shopping district that was a rock pile when city formed. I actually described it as the keystone of the community's future. And now I'm in a beautiful park. You're hearing kids playing nearby. Owner-occupied rental housing right here, Lowe's, other sorts of things, right in the middle of, as I say, 50,000 jobs. In state government, a critical function for the legislature is actually oversight. This is a vital activity that relates to, the legislature is the people's branch of government. And if the legislature is not paying attention to what the executive branch is doing, who is? It's part of our constitutional responsibility. Pre-term limits, it was very common to have, particularly my house, the assembly, strong in oversight. Term limits kind of mowed that down, John. It went away. And so one of my goals, actually from before the time I was a member, I developed, working with senior staff in the legislature once I was a member, a guide to oversight, which is on the assembly.ca.gov website, trying to revive the power of oversight as a critical function of the legislative branch of government. And at this point, all of our standing committees are doing more oversight, and I see that as directly related to work I've done. And I've carried that not just in California, the Council of State Governments West, 16 Western states, they too have adopted an approach to oversight, and I've been a part of that effort. I am a person that sort of tries to get things done. When I became a member, the voters in 1996 had approved medical marijuana use for people who are sick, medical marijuana. And in 96, when the law was passed, it said the legislature will write the rules for that. That became sort of like a Groundhog Day thing. Every year the legislature would attempt it. Every year they failed. That's not just bad for that topic, John, but actually the legislature doesn't have enough time to keep wasting it on an issue that is very complicated and absorbs a lot of effort and then fails, because that's actually preventing the legislature tackling other issues. So in my third year as a member, 2015, I decided to tackle getting rules written for medical marijuana, and I was successful. That year we actually passed a comprehensive bill. You know, yes, I hold constitutional office, but I view everybody in life, if you've been a part of a PTA or a service club like Rotary, Kiwanis, Optimus, So Optimus, Moose, Elks, if you've been active in a church, you probably are a part of an organization that says that if we have difficulty resolving our views, we will turn to Robert's Rules of Order, which is an old system of basically listening systematically so everyone's voice gets heard, and you try to find a way to find a workable center. And I would say my approach to all of my public life, 10 years in the Rancho City Council, my rise in the first 5 years of cityhood to the senior echelons of the League of Cities, my role in the state capitol, where I'm now a leader as rules chair, is all based upon a method of, you know, let voices be heard, let's work things out. Anyway.
Yeah, I think whether it's fair or not, I think a lot of people that I know, friends and acquaintances, good, bad, right, or wrong, will look at something like the assembly and say, well, it's made up of powerful people or people who think themselves important, who only listen to powerful people. And so the idea of conversation and working things out and forward momentum are kind of foreign. So what would you say to those friends of mine?
Well, I think that, you know, when I first ran for public office, John, I waited until my kids were out of high school, and I resolved to get elected by walking door to door all over Rancho Cordova. I'm a big proponent of development. Obviously, I'm sitting in outstanding development, but I actually declined to take developer money when I ran for cityhood, because I never wanted to be that public official that someone would say, Ken, we made you, we need your vote. I actually felt walking door to door, which I continue to do. I've walked all the new growth areas in Folsom, south of 50. I walked them in January and February. I've continued to walk neighborhoods all over the city. What I know to my core is, number one, you understand the people you represent better if you've walked down their street, not driven by, not looked at some statistical chart that tells you the breakdown of the community, but actually go door to door. I also know, John, that you get fantastic conversations when you, as a candidate or a public official, present yourself to someone and they have 1 foot inside their living room. You hear exactly what they're thinking. And I have always, as a legislator, multiple times a year, I do coffees. I did one just last weekend, where I invite people out for an hour and a half or 2 hours to just talk with me about what's on their minds. The one I did last weekend was up in Foothill Farms. I've done them in Gold River, Citrus Heights, Rosemont, Carmichael, all over the place. And my method in all those, John, is I don't make anybody write a question down on paper and hand it to my staff, so then my staff can figure out which ones they want to hand me to let me answer. I just, it's kind of like this. It's like whatever comes out of their mouth, I will try to deal with it. Yeah. Live right there in front of my constituents. So yeah, my whole career, I actually feel, is founded upon the fact that I try to go out and meet voters, to talk to them face to face, that fundamental idea of, I feel I've tried to build my career by interacting with my constituents. And what I find, you make your city or your assembly district your area. And then when interest groups from elsewhere sort of want to pound on you and huff and puff, and are going to blow the house down, it's like, well, actually, no, I'm grounded in my own community. So I do think I very definitely have a public service philosophy, a connect to my constituents philosophy, last Friday walking door to door up off near the Costco, but in those neighborhoods up there in the hill, I was walking. I do talk to high propensity voter households, but my lists are Democrat, Republican, Independent. If I have somebody who is invested in their government and they vote on a regular basis, I actually try to seek out those homes without regard to, the voters inside.
Yeah.
I mean, their partisanship.
Sure.
Because I represent them all.
Thank you for that. And now you are running as a Democrat. I've heard people talk about you as a moderate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. Yeah, I'm among the most conservative folks in the building on issues, but honestly, I'm a lawyer. And I would say I actually read bills. I look at them, I try to figure out what I feel about them, and against the context of, is it good policy? Do I believe the rationale is good? So I'm definitely not knee-jerk in any respect, but yeah, I actually do read bills, reflect upon their significance, how I understand them, but I totally believe in I am only one of 120 state lawmakers, but I never lose track of the fact that I hold a constitutional office. And my obligation is to perform that to the best of my ability and with a view to the future of the state and advancing the interests of the state. And I don't mean, I mean all of our communities. That's not an Ayn Rand, interest of the state sort of comment. That's what's good for all of California. And so yeah, I would say I vote the way I vote because I'm really looking at where do I think we should land? What's a reasonable policy position? And this is why I will stand up on the floor of the assembly. I don't pick fights, but I'll stand up and oppose bills by my colleagues if I think they're bad bills. I feel that is something that used to happen in the old days when Jim Nielsen, who is a good friend of mine, I've known him since the 90s, when he served in the 90s, you had more honest debate on the floor, more active debate. People brought their own perspective to the conversation. Democrat or Republican, they said what they thought. Term limits kind of cut down all the examples of that. So you have these members have come in under term limits. They don't quite understand that dimension of the institution. I actually feel that's a very important aspect of being a member, which I try to model. Say what I think, vote what I think. Yeah, I mean, I take my oath of office very, very seriously.
So what has changed since the 90s, since the good conversation days?
Well, as I say, I mean, I think the most vital function of the legislative branch of government is actually oversight. We pass the laws, that delegates implementation to an executive branch agency, but it's right for the legislature from time to time to pay attention to how's it working out. My wife, Cindy, just retired. She was 42 years a church bookkeeper. She got a letter on behalf of Cordova Neighborhood Church telling us that we had to redo our bylaws for some reason. And our particular denomination, it's a little bit difficult to change the bylaws. So she just asked him, John, can you explain to me why we have to change our bylaws here at Cordova Neighborhood? Because it's a cumbersome process. I know the board's going to ask me why. And believe it or not, that led to a 2-year undertaking. And they eventually said, well, Mrs. Cooley, you're the first person in 10 years to ask us. We don't have the right to tell you to change your bylaws. We were wrong. That to me just is symbolic of the fact that this vital function of oversight, for which, as I say, I didn't write it singly. I brought in senior staff and worked on developing a guide to oversight for the state assembly. That became the pattern for the Council of State Governments West, 16 Western states. But this is an essential function of government. And during term limits, what had happened, John, was it ended up being oversight was only done by the budget committees, by the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and one committee dealing with administrative overview and accountability. And my model, which I am pushing as rules chair, and the guide was built around it because it's the old model, is we have 31 standing committees in the Assembly. All 31, rev and tax, education, agriculture, insurance, banking and finance, all 31 in their bailiwick ought to be doing oversight. Because then you would actually start ganging up, in a sense, the legislative branch of government holding more agencies accountable. I think it's a very vital work. It took me, I first wrote a paper on oversight for the state Senate in 2010. I resolved then I should get something online. I actually was able to get my guide to oversight first released under Speaker Tony Atkins in 2015. But it wasn't until I became rules chair that I got it online, but with the support of Speaker Rendon, who himself he and I had a lot of conversations. Early in his career, he chaired the Public Utilities Commission, and he did a lot of active oversight. So out of my conversations, he did it, became a big believer of it, and has supported pushing out through our standing committees.
Good. Thank you for that. Can we, let's talk about homelessness for a bit. And I'll just throw a few rhyming questions at you. You can tackle this however you want. We've got this controversial care court conversation. We've got people who think that absolutely nothing is happening with homelessness. I would like to maybe know what your contributions have been to the homeless issue. If you think current funding headed that way is actually working, what needs to change. If not, if you can just talk all around that, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, homeless is a topic that I sort of see through the lens of being a city official, first and foremost, on a lot of levels. I have basic convictions that for homeless programs to work, they have to have accountability. They have to have serve a specific population with services. There has to be a service plan, and then the plan actually has to be worked. And I take that right out of Rancho Cordova. When, I'm sitting in about 1.5 miles from the B-52 runway here. Over in that direction, under cityhood, Rancho Cordova, with 5% of the county's population, has always housed 38% of the county's formerly homeless and transitional housing. It's a lot of different populations. It's single moms, it's emancipated foster youth. The city has built several hundred units of veterans housing over there near the hospital. But it's all been managed because so that's, if we have 5% of the people and we got 38% of the people getting these services within the county, we got 7 times our share in Rancho, right over there, 38% of the county. This is a historic number, but we've always had accountability for who's in it, services appropriate to their needs, a plan to get them in the services and hold them to going through those programs. So they're a program, and then they actually work the program. So I think, John, so many parts of life, I will say, a lot of life, we look at a problem, John, it looks impossible. Homeless can have that feel. it looks impossible. I will say, if I got anything, I'm an Eagle Scout, a Scout Master. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, all Eagle Scouts. I was a Cub Scout. I don't get rattled by impossible. I start asking, what can we do? As a city council member, that's how I learned my lesson about homeless, accountable programs, a plan, and work the plan. When I became an officer of the League of Cities, I always served on the homeless working group. I traveled on the state trying to learn more about homelessness in various places, including Santa Monica, which has had quite an issue historically there on the beach. As a legislator, I supported an idea that I took out of Utah, rapid rehousing. Utah figured out that if you get someone who's homeless and get them in a stable living environment with services, they can start working out their issues themselves. The year I pushed that as a standalone bill. It got pulled into the budget process. My bill didn't advance, but the rapid rehousing idea is moving forward in California. In terms of resources, which is all important question, in the 2021 budget, so not the one we just adopted, we set aside in various categories $2 billion for homeless. As a part of that, it is administered by the state. All the counties in California have had to develop a plan, a comprehensive plan. The deadline for those plans being submitted for funding was actually end of June this year. Sacramento County, working with the city, developed a plan. They tendered it to the state of California by the end of June. And this month, we ought to hear what feedback the state had, and all that money is going to start funding those sorts of programs. So we have been at the state level, we set aside the resources, we had all 58 counties and the major cities develop a plan, and the funding is set to flow. Here locally, I have dealt more specifically in recent years with what I regard as I say, I am a lawyer by training. I'm a McGeorge grad from 1984. There is a court decision, which we've often heard in connection with homeless, the Boise decision, which in certain respects I have felt was wrongly decided. The Boise decision said, with no exception, you can't move people out of a place where they're spending the night unless you immediately have another place to put them. The problem I have with that is here we have the Parkway, for example, which runs from through Folsom, Rancho Cordova, downtown. A beautiful part of the Parkway is actually the animals that reside there. Recreational users, we like it, of course, but the animals are there. They're a part of what makes it special, particularly in Rancho, where I've got so many low and moderate income kids. They're not going to camp in Yosemite. They're not tramping through Tuolumne Meadows. They're not even getting over to the ocean in many cases. So if they're going to get the outdoors, they're going to get it right here in our Parkway. And I have felt that the application of the Boise decision to a place like the Parkway means you're letting people turn the Parkway into a 24-hour place inhabited by people with their smells, their defecation, their whatever. And it's actually hostile to maintain this very fundamental public value of, it's Henry David Thoreau, and wildness is the preservation of the world. It's Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir on top of Half Dome. It's like a very fundamental American value is the value of the outdoors. So this year I introduced a bill. I had Kevin McCarty and Jim Cooper, our new sheriff, as my support. Rich Desmond here in the county was a big supporter of mine. My bill basically said that we're going to be able to prohibit people from camping in the Parkway. I moved it through the assembly, which gave me ample opportunity to kind of present my case for this. I introduced it early in the year. By May, the Bee was starting to cover it. They actually did a full cover page about the American River and the risk to the Parkway that featured a conversation about my bill. And in the Senate, it was not advanced. But by then, the idea had started to take root. And so, of course, the ordinance just adopted in the county is my idea that I had Rich Desmond in my press conference. We've got to not have people camping in the Parkway. That also responds to the tragedy of Emma Rourke, the young lady who was murdered here near Ambassador in Rancho Cordova by an occupant out there in the parkway. So I do feel that personally, you know, I've always made it a point to support all the hearts in the area. My own church has been a part of the heart system, a homeless assistant resource team. That accountability on the front end, you get cleared for the night, you go to the place where there's going to be housing, there's food, there's other sorts of things. So I definitely feel like progress has been made. I don't sit on the housing committee actually, but this is a value that comes, as I say, right out of cityhood, where I've seen this incredible thing that we actually have had a long compatibility with serving homeless people, not a mile from where I'm seated, but it's had accountability, services, programming, and they work the plan. And at this point, it's a wide array of populations, as I say, veterans, emancipated foster youth, and other folks, and frequently moms with kids.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about water. Water remains a huge issue in our state. What do you think we need to do to pull together to tackle this problem? And maybe you could throw in some of your ideas on the tunnel project, everything happening in the Delta. Give us an idea what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So I think for this issue, I think the Delta is where we need to start the conversation. California basically got this great mountain system to the east, the Sierra Nevadas, all the rivers that drain down off the western slope of the Sierra. So the Pitt River, the Feather River, the Yuba River, the American River, Cosumnes River, San Joaquin River, all these rivers drain the western slope of the Sierras. And the ones that are American River North, even Cosumnes North, these dump their water in the river system, and then water gets taken out of the south end of the Delta, and that supports the California economy, south. It gets piped down over the Tehachapi's. The unique problem we have in California is, from the earliest days of founding, if you Google Earth the Delta, you see lots of islands. And these islands have been in cultivation for 100 years. And it was great farmland because it was all peat. Very rich loam soil, very productive farmland. But a century of farming has taken the ag land inside these islands, these so-called islands, well down below water level. It's just 100 years of farming is slowly compressed and it's gone away. So these islands have very skinny little ribbon-like dikes to keep the water out. And so this is not a new analysis. It actually goes back to the era of Jerry Brown 1.0. There's a recognition that the way the fault systems run through the Bay Area, the Hayward Fault, the various thrust faults, there's in April of 1892, I happen to know, John, little old Vacaville and Winters had 6.4 earthquakes 2 days apart in April of 1892. That's a lot of shaking, just right by the Delta. The Hayward Fault, close by, can be a very big earthquake. And the concern is that the cataclysm for California would be an earthquake that causes these Delta Island levees to collapse, because then you're going to get salt water backing up into the Delta, because the water which should be flushing out is suddenly infilling these islands. So there is a huge issue of, because the Delta is a central part of the state's water supply plumbing, and because totally apart from sea level rise, it's at risk from the seismic problem and these old islands and the subsidence that has happened. Now you have this prospect of course, this is going to be a hot week. Concerns with sea level rise. And that means another more hydro pressure to get salt water into the Delta area where it can affect the water supply. That's sort of the underlying intellectual problem that is seen by the seismic engineers, the climate people, the folks who manage the state's water supply. So really the long-term issue has been how do we avoid the loss of water from Northern California supporting Southern California. That's why Jerry Brown had his peripheral canal idea. That's where the tunnel idea came from. So overall, I have tended to be very supportive of our local water agencies because they're actually doing water injection sorts of things. They've done things to share water around locally. Carmichael Water District has a pipeline that goes under the river now that ties into the water supply in the Rancho Grove side of the river. And of course, I consider here in Sacramento, we have the hardest working water in California because so much of our water gets used, even waters in Lawns and Folsom end up back in the river. And so it's like, it's not lost like it's lost, gone out to the ocean. It re-enters the system. So you got to do work on efficient use. I definitely think I've worked very hard to support all the Sacramento Valley water agencies on reuse and pumping pumping back in to kind of save it in that form. I have supported the funding for the Sites Reservoir and the other reservoir down the river, and at the moment it's not coming to mind. I want to say Temperance. I don't think that's right, but it starts with a T anyway. I do think, for the reasons I've described, added capacity in storage would be helpful. But the long term, I think the tunnel probably, what that is all about, to just complete the thought, is the idea is to create a place where clean water can enter a secure channel and get far enough south so it can be shipped south. And to the extent that we have seismic or other things that produce saltwater intrusion deeper into the Delta than we have today, the water supply will still be safe. That's what that whole conversation is about. I will say this, John. I formulated probably 30 years ago what I called my leadership syllogism. I said homeless can look impossible. I actually believe all great things in life have to go through a cycle, John, of impossible, improbable, inevitable. You know, you can't just take the prospect of impossible and be frozen by that. You have to man up, woman up, you have to deal with things. That's our state's second office building downtown, not the Capitol. Right across the street, it says, carved in the granite of the state's first office building, the UNRWA building we call it now, is bring me men, of course that means people, to match my mountains. California doesn't need people to look at the mountain and say, I'm tired, I'm not going to try. We need people that respond to these challenges. So to me, the conversation you have to have is, here's where we are today, which is bad for these reasons. Here's where we be tomorrow, which would be better for these reasons. You're meeting, here are the problems, here's how you would meet them. And here's how you go A to B. I think part of the problem is, I actually understand the logic of why this idea of finding a way to move clean water around the areas of the Delta where it's subject to saltwater intrusion makes tremendous sense. But I don't think they've kind of followed the Ken Cooley leadership syllogism. Here's your day, which is bad. Here's where we could be. And here's how you sort of have to break things down a little bit.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. There was a little technological glitch in the matrix, as we like to say, and my free version of Zoom cut off our meeting. I'm sorry about that, Ken. And but here's the great thing. This is ingenuity. Ken Cooley called my restaurant and left his phone number. I mean, that was smart.
Yeah. Boy Scout, you know, you got to solve problems. I tried to own my little piece of the bump in the road anyway.
No. Yeah. Well, thank you. So I'm sorry. You were we were talking about water. We were talking about having great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the water issue and how Pat Brown was instrumental in plumbing the state, set up a water system to support our state. The role of the Delta is a conduit for fresh water used by Southern Californians. It does support the economy, and you see it locally in Folsom as we do in Rancho. With all the talk of housing, it's places like Folsom and Rancho Cordova that are busy growing housing. But you can't grow housing without an assured source of water supply. And so if you're going to grow housing for our state, you've got to have water. So water is indispensable, of course, to life, but it's actually very important for the growth of housing, which intertwines with so many things. That's what supports jobs. I mean, like, I'm proud that in my first 12 months as city councilor, I was involved in planning this, as we've already talked about, a park with housing in the middle of 50,000 jobs. So people can, they can take a break from their office and go do some shopping at Lowe's to size up a project on the weekend and get back to their office in 15 minutes. There's just a synergy that happens. But you need water, you need housing, and I certainly see the water issue is extremely important to Folsom. And Folsom has a lot of development, but actually Folsom is a very complete community. It's like, yes, we're growing a lot of housing in Folsom, but what people need to enjoy life, to meet their needs, is all there in a very compact footprint. It is growing its edge, but it's there in a compact footprint, but water is essential. And, yes, it's a ways from the downtown, but once you're at home, you don't need to be running to the downtown. It gives people what they need in a compact area. So I definitely see this issue of water is very, very important to the whole state's economic engine. And, Jerry was persuaded when he first talked about the Purple Canal in the 70s and early 80s, before sea level rise was really even seen as a concern, So, yeah, it is a critical issue. So I definitely support, some of the water bills I have opposed, even though they would make progress on water. But that's sort of the thoughtful side of me, feeling that actually our use of water here in the Sacramento region is very hardworking, because some of what we use ends up in the river. I mean, in my neighborhood, the sewer grates actually have that on it, drains to river, right where it's going. So I do think that there's a need to understand sort of the nuances of our water issues. And I actually think our water district personnel do know that. In our race, Ray Reel, who's a two-time Rotary president, he ran also in the 7th Assembly District in the primary. Obviously, he did not win. But Ray Reel, 2 times Rotary president, he's on the Citrus Heights Water Board. So he actually had a water expertise. He was the candidate with water expertise in the conversation. I think we need to respect that expertise at the local level. But again, I think a lot of these things, you have to have a method to your conversation. And it doesn't work to think, oh, I see the problem, I see a solution, so I just want to stuff my solution down your throat. And if people don't agree with me, well, that's just their problem. They need to get with the program. I'm much more of a, no, we have to work on these things together in a collaborative way. And so that we listen, we get buy-in. I mean, I do think that is entirely my method. It's why I've been successful. And it goes right down to going door to door, to how I conduct myself in office, listening to people. It's my coffees. It's how I did the medical marijuana thing. I partner with Tom Lackey, a Republican, former CHP sergeant out of Palmdale. He was a part of my effort from the very start in that year, 2015, that breakthrough year. And I ended up getting the bill in that I had the support of the League of Cities and the police chiefs, pretty different groups. And that became sort of the core upon which we built progress that year. But it's the way in which our system is so dependent upon individuals and respect and listening, and I do have to say, Robert's Rules of Order, which I use as sort of this model, which is even, it's not in the Constitution, but it is this approach of how you get to the sense of a body. Even in that system, some people get what they want, some people don't get what they want.
Sure.
A good solution, probably not everyone gets all they want. It's not tyranny. It's trying to find a workable middle. And we did have that in the old days. Ken Maddy, the great Republican minority leader from Fresno, Senate Republican leader, and Willie Brown, after the Loma Prieta earthquake, we had freeways falling down, a lot of California at risk. It jeopardized the water supply coming out of Hetch Hetchy. It made them worry about that water supply, which, the Hetch Hetchy water system, which brings water to the peninsula, that's a gravity feed system, its whole length. You could put a marble in the water system up at Hetch Hetchy, and it would come out on the peninsula. Amazing engineering there, but these systems, they take effort to maintain and I just feel we need to have more conversations that are more inclusive, where here is where we are. This is the downside. Yeah, we don't want people messing with our water, but if you can't grow housing, how will the economic engine, which is Folsom and Rancho Cordova and El Dorado Hills, be sustained as it grows and brings more workforce? And we live in such a unique place. We are a global destination. Obviously, you have the great Indian American population that is in the East County. The Slavic population is huge here. I have on my lapel, my U.S.-Ukrainian flag. I've done a lot this year with the Ukrainian community. Within 10 days of the invasion, I realized that there was Ukrainian moms with kids being stopped at our southern border because the immigration border folks hadn't done what they did for the Afghanis, which is to say the administration had not yet given the instruction to provide a humanitarian entry. And so you had all these nations in Europe of limited means letting people come in to get refuge from the war. And we were stopping moms with kids on our southern border. So I actually, John, drafted a letter to the president. I drafted it like the second week of the invasion. I shared it with my colleague, James Gallagher, who's a Republican minority leader in my House and a very liberal member of my Democratic caucus, on that Friday to go to sort of the two ends of the spectrum, sharing them my work, which was a letter to the president saying you ought to find a way to bring people here, just as you did for Afghan refugees. They both signed off on Friday, so I said, okay, that's a good letter when I get those two views. And I just walked onto the floor of the assembly on Monday morning, and in 90 minutes, I had 66 co-authors to my letter to the president and mailed it the next day. And within about 12 days, we heard announcements that they were relaxing the border. That's not to say there weren't other people screaming all over the nation, but within barely 2 weeks of the invasion, almost the entire state assembly in California was on record asking the president to do more and to not feel like it's some dramatic change because you did it for the Afghans who are our partners. And, you know, I just worked with the governor. Ronald Reagan, when he was governor, issued a proclamation in support of independence of Ukraine, which was 31 years ago, Wednesday of last week, the 24th. And I started a conversation with the governor's office about 3 weeks ago, last night, saying, Mr. Governor, you ought to do it for recognize the 31st anniversary. No governor since Ronald Reagan has acknowledged their independence. I won't pull it up for you, but we have such a deep partnership with California. It's almost cool. You might want to do it sometime just to do it. Over on Old Placerville Road, just outside the city limits of Rancho Cordova, is where the California National Guard headquarters is. And if you go in the lobby of the California National Guard headquarters there on Old Placerville Road, what you're going to see hanging on the wall is a Ukrainian battle flag. We have had a Ukrainian battle flag in the headquarters of our Cal National Guard for 15 or 20 years.
Wow.
This is quite a partnership. It's pretty awesome to see and realize, you know, what that's all about. And it's interesting because it's hanging on the wall, but it doesn't actually tell you it's a Ukrainian battle flag. There is a plaque underneath it, and you go up and read the plaque, John. It's the lyrics of their national anthem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I need to go check that out.
Yeah, it's awesome. Anyway, so to me, a lot of these things that look impossible, the public doesn't want impossible. The public wants someone that can work on it. It's that building across the street, which I think is so awesome. Bring me people to match my mountains. Bring me men to match my mountains. It's not just males, you know. And that whole thing, you know, the first wagon train to enter California came in 1844. They came up the Truckee River Canyon. They had to ford the river 24 times as they gained elevation because a canyon wall would close on one side. Basically, they're driving the oxen for hours up the middle of the river in October. The hooves go soft. The animals are bellowing in pain. They got around Donner Lake. They had to go up the backside of Donner Lake, which is just a rock field, because for millennia, the rains fall, it turns to ice, the water gets in the rocks, and then when it freezes, it chips away the mountain. They got to the top of that mountain, John. There was a cliff facing them, but there was a crack in the cliff. They got their oxen up to that, they manhandled them to the top of the cliff, unpacked their wagons, carried their goods to the top of the cliff, physically manhandled the wagons over the top, put it all back together, and on to California. And the idea is, therefore, to me, bring me men to match my mountains, is we need people that every morning can get up and realize, oh my gosh, there's more of the mountain in front of me. That they engage in teamwork, perseverance, toughness, and actually they don't waste time. I mean, I feel like actually in 10 years, 20 years in public service, 10 years in the assembly, I've already having an impact on the institution, matters of public policy, the tone of the building. Obviously, I feel proud of what I've done in Rancho Cordova, and not just in Rancho, but the leadership I gave at the league and other settings, this oversight idea that I'm taking nationally as a lawmaker, and I'm well on my way because my work with CSUS. It's like one of the awesome things for me personally, you know, a mile away, that was a B-52 bomber base. And if you're in the military, Army, Navy, whatever, it's all about deployment. You have responsibilities, and then one day you get the call, you got to go do something. I very much feel my public life, my whole career is about deployment. It's like, I know who I am. What am I going to do with my life? And I feel this idea of, well, I got to deploy myself. I got to bring my life to bear on issues to make a difference. And it's not good enough to just live in Groundhog Day, because I need to put issues like medical marijuana to bed, because there are other pressing issues that the legislature needs to focus itself upon. And you've talked about it, like water, like homeless. yeah, these are challenging times, but I do believe in working with people to make headway. And as much as I would say that is our democratic system, and it's our Constitution, and it's the oath of office which we take, I take it even that idea of it. Hey, it's Robert's Rules of Order. Respect people, give everyone a voice, try to find a common center. Don't act like you're king, because you're not king.
You're not.
You know?
Neither am I.
Yeah.
I don't want to be king. Ken, thanks
Yeah.
for your time today. We need to wrap this up, but I'm going to ask you, we've been talking about a bunch of stuff that actually matters. This next question doesn't matter, but I'm asking everyone a question just for fun. So we have a silly denouement here to this thing. So this is a section I like to call Politicians Answer Medical Questions. So here you go. I've been getting intense headaches lately. Ken, why? Why am I getting headaches?
Well, it's the prospect of talking to politicians, I think. I mean, you know, we don't have the wind blowing the pollen around. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? I will listen to that's wise words. Maybe I should just stop this. No, thank you so much. I appreciate all your time.
Yeah, and the whole little bump in the road, no problem at all. And I knew we were going to connect, but I figured, well, okay, we didn't get it the easy way, so one way or another we were going to connect. So
we made it happen. We busted through that mountain.
Yeah, indeed. Very good. Well, pleasure to meet you, John, and best of luck on your music.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Ken. Bye-bye.